Welcome back to another tutorial, and in today's tutorial we're going to learn how to make this 3D printable hex fidget inside Fusion 360. I would rank this an easy medium tutorial, especially if you want to learn how to make fidgets just like this. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into Fusion and get started. So to get started with this design, the first thing we need to do here is hover over to create, new component, and let's go ahead and create a new component by naming this to hex fidget. Press OK. From here, let's hover over to create a sketch, then selecting the front plane here. This will automatically reorient us to this front plane here so we can start sketching. Zooming in with our mouse, let's go ahead and press L on our keyboard, or you can also select the line icon here on the top left-hand side. From the origin, drag this out. Let's set the distance here to around 5 millimeters. You can either drag this out to 5 millimeters or just type in 5 on your keyboard. Once that's done, click the check icon. Next, we're going to create a line going from the left to the middle, then up to the right. From the dot, going to the left, then to the right, then click the check icon here. The next thing we need to do here is make sure that these lines at no point move or shift out of place at any point in the process. To do that, we can go ahead and select the horizontal vertical icon here, then selecting these two dots. And now if we were to try to shift this, you can see at no point will these two dots ever shift out of place. If you do happen to move it or to change the position, you can just press Command Z or Control Z if you're on Windows to undo anything you may have done. We also need to make sure that these two lines have the same distance, and as well as the degrees also matches up. To do that, we're going to press D on our keyboard, select this line and this line, drag this out, and we're going to set the degrees here to 130 degrees. And as you can see, once we've done that, our line extended all the way up. To fix that, we can press D on our keyboard, select the line, drag this out, and set this to around 8 millimeters. We'll also repeat the exact same thing for the bottom, but instead of setting a dimension, we'll use the equal constraint here, selecting this line and then this line. Now, as you can see, these two lines are fully constrained within Fusion 360, meaning that this line is 8 millimeters, this line is also 8 millimeters, the distance here is 5, and the degrees between this line and this line is 130. The next thing we need to do here is to create two more lines going from the left to the bottom right, and then closing this off. Pressing L on your keyboard, selecting the dots to the left, to the middle, to the bottom, and to the right. Next, we need to press D on our keyboard, select this top line, and let's go ahead and set up a value here. This will be 1.2 millimeters, and the bottom will also be the same. You can either dimension this or use the equal constraint icon here, selecting the top line, then the bottom, and now both of them are constrained. We'll also use the parallel constraint icon shown here, so that way this line here is fully parallel with this line on the right-hand side, making it completely parallel to each other. In the same way, these two are parallel to each other as well. If they're not parallel, you can go ahead and select them, but if they already are, it will show an arrow here. But if they already are, it will show an error here on the right-hand side. Once that's done, finish sketch. And the next thing we want to do here is to create another sketch. Let's hover over to create sketch, then select the bottom plane. And what we want to do is hover over to create, polygon, circumscribe polygon. Then from the origin, we're going to create one polygon. This one will be around 5 millimeters. Let's go ahead and zoom in, that way you get a better look. Let's create another one. And this one will be around, let's just say 25 millimeters, which in total is around 50 millimeters. The way we know that is because if this to this here is 25, then that means this dot over to this side is also 25, which is a total of 50 millimeters, which will be about the size of our design. Next, let's go ahead and create a couple of lines on this profile here. Let's press L on our keyboard, select this edge to this edge here, then from this edge to this edge, and then from the middle all the way to the end. From here, pressing E on our keyboard, we're going to turn this profile we just made into a solid body. Next, let's go ahead and set the direction here on the right-hand side to 2 sides. And let's go ahead and move this out. And that way we can turn this profile into a solid body. Now, the key thing I do want to mention is that you want to make sure that these 2 sides reach all the way to this dot here. And you can kind of could see it, you kind of can't. I'm just basing it off just based off what I'm seeing here. And I'm also going to make sure they're the same exact distance here. From here, I went ahead and set this to around 14. And the other side will also be 14 as well. And I'll explain why more in a sec. Once you're happy with your look, press OK. Then pressing S on your keyboard, typing in pattern on path, we're going to use this feature here with the little 3 dots on the left-hand side. We're going to select the last feature in our timeline, selecting the path, which is the middle line here, and we'll go ahead and drag this up. I'm going to go ahead and select the icon here where it's called distribution and change this to spacing. This allows us to change the spacing in between the objects itself. So for example, our hex fidget needs plenty of space for it to print in place without the filament adhering to each other, but while having enough room for it to give it that hex-like effect. To do that, what I'm going to do is set the starting point here to 0. I'm also going to set the distance here and just move it back, as you can see, until they touch each other. Now, the thickness of this item here is 1.2. So if we were to set this to 1.2, these bodies will automatically adhere to each other. If we were to set this to a 1.6, that means there's enough space for them to not to adhere to each other, but depending on what printer you're using and the type of printer you have, it's very likely that these layer lines could adhere to each other. So I'm going to set this up with the 1.8, which gives us around a 0.6 millimeter distance in between these lines. This is plenty of space for them to fidget around inside each other without them accidentally falling out. You can also tinker with this and set this to around 2, but just to be safe, I'm going to set this to a 1.8, which is what I use for my design as shown in the video. I can also increase the quantity here. And as you can see, the more I add in quantity, the more will populate here. Once that's done, and once I'm happy with the amount of products I've added, make sure the amount of products you added don't extend farther beyond this line here, and press OK. The next thing we need to do here is select this outer profile. This outer profile is what we're going to use to cut into our design by pressing E on our keyboard, then setting the distance or the extent type to toObject, selecting the top face, and as you can see, our profile has directly cut into our design. Additionally, you can also just select the profile, press E on your keyboard, and then just drag this arrow up above it so that way it cuts into our design. Once that's done, press OK. Now, if we were to take a closer look by toggling our component, turning on sketches, turning off sketch 1 and 2, you can see we have our design fully created within Fusion 360. Now, one thing I have noticed is that this did not make a complete cut here. So if I were to turn on sketch 2, reduce the amount of items I've added here in the quantity section to maybe around 9, now we can ensure this item is fully cut out and that this boundary here or this body here doesn't overextend this line. If by any chance it populates an error, just go ahead and double click and fix it. Then let's turn off sketch 2. And what we're going to do now is press S on our keyboard, type in circular pattern, then selecting the last features within our timeline, selecting the axis, which is the Z axis, and let's go ahead and set the quantity to around 6. Make sure the compute type is set to adjust and press OK. And with that done, we fully completed our 3D printable hex fidget inside Fusion 360. We can go ahead and export this to our slicer. And as you can see, here's our 3D printed design. If I were to slice this, it's going to take us about 30 minutes to print. And you can see the layers don't adhere to each other, giving us this nice smooth finish, allowing the prints to print in place without any possible issues. Just make sure your layer or your bed adhesion is on point, so that way at no point these lines will ever shift or move out of place. So with all that said, that pretty much wraps up today's tutorial. In this video, we've pretty much covered exactly how to design this 3D printable hex fidget inside Fusion 360. If you want to get access to more tutorials just like this and you want to further your skills around Fusion 360, I'm going to leave a link down below to the 14-day challenge showing you exactly how to turn your ideas into 3D printable designs, even if you're a complete beginner and or never modeled your own designs before. In this 14-day challenge, we show you exactly how to design your own models, so that way you can start from scratch and show you exactly how to create your own 3D printable designs for 3D printing. But with that said, if you guys like this video, make sure to like, subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.